Welcome to On Cage, the show that celebrates thought leadership from today's top business leaders. The program provides a voice to amazing executives from around the globe who are shaping the world of business today and mapping the path to the commerce of tomorrow. Today, we're speaking with Kirk Hayes. Hey, Kirk, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I am well. And Kirk, we're talking about a topic that is on everybody's minds today. Kirk is the Chief Operating Officer of Dunlieh Energy. He's also on the board of DKN Renewables. And really, those are two examples of many, many things that he's done in the renewable energy space. Kirk is a renowned global renewable energy expert, and we'll be talking about what's happening in that industry, with that space, how it's affecting the world, how we're progressing, or Kirk, perhaps how we're not progressing. You'll tell me. But before we get there, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career.
Sure. Well, that's a pretty fancy introduction. But yeah, so as stated, my name's Kirk Hayes, and those two positions are kind of currently where I'm at in the world of renewables. But I've had a pretty interesting journey getting here. I actually started off in the United States Marine Corps, and I think that really kind of helped set me up for this role actually in the renewables. But after the Marines, I landed in Silicon Valley. That was probably about 1996, and I started working in semiconductors. That was a pretty big shock at the time, but it really goes back to my philosophy on how to be successful. After that first interview, they walked me over to a clean room, and they showed me this huge pane of glass, and I looked through it, and I saw a whole bunch of robots and people wearing what I'd never seen before, but it's called a clean room bunny suit. And I thought, holy smokes, what did I just get myself into? So, because the last thing I'd been doing was fixing radios in the dirt. So that and carrying an M16. So it seemed like a far stretch from what I was doing a couple of weeks earlier. But as I like to say, everybody cooks with water. All right. So whether you're Gordon Ramsay or you're a college student making top ramen in the dorm room, it all starts with the basics. And so that's sort of how I've approached my philosophy is just, let's get in there, let's roll our sleeves up. We can figure this out, right? And so I started as a technician in semiconductors and continued to work my way up. Semiconductors actually created the opportunity to transition into solar. So a number of years later, I got a phone call from some folks that said, hey, we would like to make solar cells, and we want to use some equipment that we heard you know how to fix and manipulate and all these fun things. Because up at that point, I'd been a field service technician traveling the world, so working in Singapore, China, Japan. And so that they pitched their idea to me, and I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure we can make it do that. And we certainly did. So that was basically a thin film sputtering on glass, and we made solar cells. So my entry into renewables was actually through the manufacturing and development of solar cells using a SIG stack, copper, indium, gallium, and selenium. Now, for folks familiar with the solar industry, we all know that SIGs never made it, right? The preferred choice of solar cells is silicon. And so we were one of those that didn't make it. Right? So we raised $50 million, developed some technology. We made some solar cells, weren't able to compete. But at this point, I was now branded a solar guy. And to my shock, I wasn't too late. I thought I was too late to the market, but actually it turns out I wasn't, right? So my next stop was SunEdison, where they said, hey, you've got a patent in solar cells. You've been doing some solar technology work, and you understand startups, all this fun stuff. Come be a project manager. So I said, all right, I'll be a project manager at SunEdison. Well, a couple of weeks later, that was actually me standing in a desert in the middle of North Las Vegas, surrounded by construction guys. And I was like, okay, this is a little bit different. Wasn't quite the project management I had in mind. And so I looked around and told all the guys, I said, you guys know I've never done this before, right? So our goal at the time, the largest solar project in the United States, which is going to sound funny, 35 megawatts. So at that time, that was the largest project on the books. And I had never built a solar project before, but they said, well, you know, solar stuff. So here's some construction guys, go build that project. And that's what we did. So had every single problem known to man, from contract issues to electrical issues. When the inverters turned on, smoke came out of them, which isn't always good. We had soils issues. And to be honest with you, I look back on it fondly now, because that was a great training ground to learn how to navigate those issues, how to work through those, because that's the world of renewables, right? You know, and as Mike Tyson always likes to say, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. So,
yeah. No, I think that's such a great point. And I do truly feel like anyone who plays in emerging industries, emerging spaces, it's always kind of getting your hands dirty, getting in there, doing the real build, the real work that actually gives you the expertise to map out a more effective, broader strategy. But it's critical knowledge, because as you just pointed out, all will fall apart, you know, when you actually get out there on the field. So Kirk, I mean, you've been working on a lot of things. Certainly solar has been kind of the bedrock of your entry into the renewable energy space. But tell me a little bit more. I mean, you're obviously working with a lot of businesses. What are you working on specifically right now?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I mean, the latest stuff that gets me excited is hydrogen. Right. So, you know, when you look at the current situation with the grid, you look at sort of the mandates that have been thrown out there, right or wrong. I've got certainly some opinions on that, but you know, it's a really tall order to be able to stand up the electric grid, and especially if we're just going PV and batteries, right? The infrastructure isn't there. Everything we have is antiquated. And when I take a look at hydrogen, which is something that's, you know, been around, but never really quite made inroads yet, now I think is the time that we will see hydrogen start to transition for a couple of reasons. One, because we can't do it with electric, right? Mm-hmm. So number two is, I think it's the path of least resistance when you look at the companies like the big oil companies, right? For every gas station out there to be able to put an electrical charger in there, that's a pretty hard thing to do, because it's a different animal. You've got interconnections with the grid, you've got different permitting requirements, and the infrastructure just has to continue to be built. Similar to why Elon basically built his own infrastructure in the beginning. Yeah. I mean, it's still kind of the same thing, right? Now you look at hydrogen can be transported through liquid. And if you look at every gas station out there, it's liquid, right? So a lot of the fossil fuel folks, I think they're going to take a look at this, and they're going to start to adopt it and say, well, wait a minute, we already have the infrastructure. This is something that feels familiar, not too hard for us to go drop a hydrogen pump at every single Chevron and every single Shell station out there, right? Mm-hmm. And they already have the refining capability. They already have the pipelines. They've already got all the tankers that they can transport all this. So I think what we're going to start to see here in the future is going to be a transition that picks up and surpasses purely electric. And then I did a little bit of peeking around. I talked to some of the car manufacturers. I mean, they're already working on it. Their next version of hybrids isn't going to be fossil fuels plus battery. It's going to be hydrogen fuel cells and battery. Right.
Yeah, so you'll have battery. I've heard the same thing. We've had a couple of guests on the show that are focusing on hydrogen, and I'm a big believer in hydrogen as well. It's been interesting because I think there's a misunderstanding, probably from a layman's perspective, which was that kind of electric competes with hydrogen. But I do understand now that the thinking is no. They're going to layer in hydrogen onto the electric,
right,
and then essentially go from there. So that makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, I've seen obviously the work that Honda did in the hydrogen space, so there is some promise there. But I mean, when we look at that, is this a promise that we're going to see in the next, I'd say 5 years, or is this kind of like a 10 to 20 year thing or 50-year thing?
I do think it'll be probably in the next 5 years. Simply because I mean some of the projects I'm working on, I'm purely doing the greenfield development at this point, right? So I've got some projects down in Southern California, another project in Utah, another one in Georgia. And what I mean is I literally have the control of the land, and we're not being stopped yet in terms of we're proceeding with environmental studies, we're proceeding with all the jurisdictional pieces of that, and so far no roadblocks, right? People are people. When I say people, I mean the community as well as the jurisdictions that have authority in that area are supportive of us building hydrogen projects. Our angle on it is sort of combining the PV solar as much as possible to provide the electricity for the electrolysis piece of the hydrogen.
Oh, okay.
So hence the term green hydrogen, because it does take a good chunk of power to do that reaction. So we have, like I said, down in Southern California, we've got about 80 acres. We only need probably 20 of it for the hydrogen, and then the rest of it will be PV. And if that doesn't provide all the electricity we need, then we'll just supplement from the grid as well. But at the same time, what you're ending up with is hydrogen that's being produced by solar energy.
Nice, nice. So using photovoltaic power to drive essentially evaporation, is that what we're kind of doing, and then turning it into a gas?
Yeah, it's the
gas, and then
right.
we kind of
So
do a
we'll
separation
use
process.
we'll use hydrogen electrolyzer technologies, and which we're evaluating right now. There's Europe's made some good strides, and there. I mean, electrolyzers have been around for quite some time, but people haven't really been paying attention to them to all of a sudden now. We're in an interesting time frame where the investment community is ready to invest, but the technology and the supply chain aren't ready to meet the demand, right? So we actually have more demand than supply. But one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm talking to a lot of the different hydrogen electrolyzer manufacturers, as well as all the downstream components, because you need compressors, for transportation when the gas is created and all these things. So we're taking a look at all that and trying to see who the right players are that can help us, with some of these first early projects. And then the other piece of that, which just starting to dip my toe into, is the possibility of using hydrogen for long duration energy storage. There's some pretty interesting applications, and this is what really gets me excited, is repurposing abandoned oil wells. I think this would be a phenomenal use of some of the previous fossil fuels that everybody says, oh, it's bad. Well, hey, you know what, if we can repackage that up and get some great use out of that, would be awesome. And one of the ways to do that is by injecting hydrogen down into these abandoned oil wells, and you can store it down there, kind of like a battery, like a hydrogen battery, so to speak, right? And then you can draw off of it in the future, right? So there's some pretty interesting ideas out there that we think can really help this transition to meet the grid incapacities that we need.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting time, and I can see that hydrogen is starting to get a lot more focus. Some of these projects that you're outlined sound fascinating. Did you find over this moment that we've been living through and with the pandemic, more interest and opportunity in the hydrogen space? Were people more readily, I guess, open to listening to ideas, or how have you found it over the last couple of years?
Yeah, so I don't think the pandemic really impacted renewables at all. I was one of the folks. Now, at that time, I was deploying a tracker system for solar, and I never stopped traveling. I actually had papers with me that said, this is part of the infrastructure that's required, and I remember having to present those papers just to get a hotel one night in some random place. So I think renewables wasn't impacted philosophically by the pandemic. Certainly supply chain has, created a huge havoc on everybody, and that's still unwinding. But I'd say that the focus on hydrogen was just the realization that politicians have kind of picked these astronomical numbers and deadlines in terms of goal setting, right? That as a project manager, you got to question some of that. Go, are you serious? I mean, don't get me wrong. I love renewables. And I think, there's a lot of common sense there. But I do think we should leave the politicians out of it and develop an actual, real plan that says, here's how you get from point A to point B, and you don't just go and flip a light switch on, right? And so I think, that being said, I do also understand sort of the visionaries that like to just throw some sort of astronomical, hey, we got to reach for the moon. And if we reach for the moon, hey, maybe we'll get to the top of that mountain. Okay. Yeah. I understand that, but you're also, it comes across a little forced sometimes. Yeah. But either way, I think the end result is positive for everybody. It's, they've set some pretty astronomical goals out there and deadlines. And that is kind of forcing people to think and say, well, how do we get there? And I think people realize we're not going to get there with batteries alone, right? Yeah. And that's where now the hydrogen story starts to pick up. And then you go, okay, but hydrogen still requires a lot of power, right? We got to get that from somewhere. Okay, well, I guess we could build more solar plants to provide that. You go, okay, so you start connecting these dots and figuring out how do we meet these mandates, and hopefully within the time frame that they like. Although I don't think that'll happen, but we got to give it a shot, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, I do think though, Kirk, that what I've seen over the last, let's say, 12 months is companies embracing and telling their, I'd say, electric story, right? Especially electric vehicle story. I mean, with General Motors announcing their whole electric vehicle strategy. And I actually would say that we're still maybe in the very early innings of the hydrogen tell, right? I mean, I feel like there's people like you that are really in the know that are actually pushing it forward. But if I were to go to have a coffee with friends tonight, I have a feeling that if I asked them about hydrogen, their knowledge would be pretty limited.
Sure. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. From that aspect, I definitely agree. I know that GM is actually working on a truck that they're going to release that's got hydrogen and battery. And I think they're targeting 25 or 26, for that vehicle. And so I think that's why when I think about that, I think, the 5-year horizon makes sense, but it's probably.
Well, I think maybe I'm slightly cynical on the vehicle front, but I'm thinking they think they're going to sell all the electric vehicles because there's all these government mandates to do so over the next couple of years. And then once they've sold the electric vehicles, then they're going to say, no. Now you got to buy a hydrogen vehicle.
Well, yeah. So I think what we're going to see is, we're going to probably see electric and an electric hydrogen blend, right? Yeah. Where because I do think 100% electric is still viable when you're in sort of that smaller urban area, where your footprint is, within 80 miles. There's no need for hydrogen, right? You can book around. It's very convenient. You can charge at your house. So I don't think electric vehicles suddenly become antiquated. I think those still always have a place in the transportation system. Right. Hydrogen becomes great when you want to eliminate range anxiety, right? Now you've got a battery vehicle that benefits from the torque of batteries, and you can actually have a smaller battery pack. And then you hit highway cruising speeds and you transition over to a hydrogen fuel cell and you drive hundreds of miles and you haven't touched your batteries, right? So I think, we look at, Hyzon Motors is probably a good example. Parker Meeks over there is actually a person I used to work with back in McKinsey. And so they're doing some great things over at Hyzon. And I think when you look at that, you look at Ohmium, who's developing the hydrogen technology with Ahmad. Again, somebody I worked with at Sun Edison. I think you look at some of those companies, and then myself kind of being in the middle saying, here, guys, let's all get together and talk, right?
Yeah.
Ahmad, you give me the electrolyzers. Parker, you guys, here's my hydrogen, right? And then we go sit down with GM, right? And then we deploy something of that nature. That's how you win this battle, right?
That's exciting. That's really exciting. Well, Kirk, I mean, here we are at the end of another kind of period of, I guess, solving things right post-pandemic, and now we move into this lovely recessionary moment that we're supposedly living through. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in the short term for hydrogen.
Well, short term is interesting because, like I kind of alluded to earlier, the investment community wants it and they're ready to finance it. But it's the supply chain of technology that says, hey, either we can't create enough of it, or they're not there yet, right? They're still working the bugs out to do it at this scale, right? That people want. And so that's going to be a little bit interesting to work through. And then the other piece of this that is sort of the a bit of my passion is sort of the optimization and execution side of this. It's the labor force, right? Whether you're talking PV, solar, or wind, or anything, right? And I'm talking mostly about the labor force in North America right now.
Yeah.
Having that skilled labor force is kind of, might be a challenge, right? People are trying to figure out, when I talk to all the big folks that are out there, Mortenson, Blattner, the Rosendin Electrics, all these different EPCs, you look at their books, they're booked, right? And so you come up with a new project. Hey guys, we'd like to go do this. Now the issue is, well, who's going to do it? Right. Like everybody's already booked, like out through 24. And, now folks are trying to actually get on the books for 2 years out. Right. Yeah. So it's a pretty interesting time frame, but I do think that creates opportunities for folks that are willing to get out there and roll their sleeves up and learn the industry, right? And learn how to do this. Solar is a little bit different, and then the hydrogen piece is unknown to the renewable guys. And this is where I think it's going to get real fun, right? For years, it's been gas and oil guys are over here, renewable guys are over here. They don't talk, Recently, we've seen some gas and oil folks kind of trickle into the solar industry and start doing their first solar projects. Yep. Solar projects go up a lot faster than gas and oil, so it's a little bit of a different animal. But now with the potential onset of hydrogen, I think now we find a place for all these gas and oil guys that all the renewable guys were kind of, hey, we don't need you over here, right? Well, now we do. Yeah. So I think hydrogen, is going to be an interesting sort of, let's all get together at the campfire and hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Right?
Yeah, no, I like that. And certainly it leads us down a path that can scale, because the miss is to condemn one side or the other as correct or wrong, right? And not to figure out that we really need to I hate to say it, but kumbaya a little bit and come together on this thing if we really want to solve the issues of the day. Well, Kirk, it's been amazing having you on the show today. If someone wanted to learn more about what you're working on, where's the best place to reach you?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing is I don't update exactly what I'm doing, but kirkhayes.com, you can, catch up with me there. I don't really blog on there, but certainly there's an email address there if they wanted to hit me up with Kirk at kirkhayes.com. And certainly my LinkedIn profile of Kirk Hayes, that's always available for pretty much the broader network.
Great. Well, Kirk, thank you again for being on the show. We've been speaking with Kirk Hayes. He is a global renewable energy expert. He's also the COO of Dunlieh Energy, and he's on the board of DKN Renewables. We've been talking about primarily hydrogen. I'd say the story of the evolution of what's happening in the solar space, where we are with electrics, and really the emergence of hydrogen as potentially a bridge for different technologies, as well as something that can scale for our needs in the future. Kirk, thank you so much for being on the Uncaged Show, and we look forward to having you back.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.